Smokey reporting. I need it bad, son.
This is Foxy Lady Bandit.
I'll catch you on the flip side, darling. I'm too pooped to pop.
How does a movie with a handwritten script, a first-time director, and a modest budget become one of the biggest box office hits of 1977? By all accounts, Smokey and the Bandit should never have become a Hollywood classic. Behind the legendary Black Trans Am and unforgettable chases are behind-the-scenes stories, just as entertaining as the movie itself. From unexpected casting decisions and dangerous stunts to unbelievable real-life inspirations, here are 13 weird facts you probably never knew about Smokey and the Bandit. Number 13. Jackie Gleason created his own character. Ask almost any fan of Smokey and the Bandit to name the movie's funniest character, and chances are they'll say Sheriff Buford T. Justice. What many people don't realize is that much of what made him unforgettable wasn't written in the script at all. Director Hal Needham gave Jackie Gleason an unusual amount of creative freedom, trusting him to shape the character however he saw fit. Instead of sticking closely to the script, Gleason often invented dialogue on the spot, turning ordinary scenes into comedy classics. Gleason didn't want Buford driving around by himself. He wanted someone sitting beside him, someone he could interrupt, lecture, and completely overwhelm for the entire movie. That simple idea led to the creation of Junior, Buford's long-suffering son, whose reactions became just as funny as his father's outbursts. According to Hal Needham, as much as 80 to 90% of Buford's dialogue was improvised. Even the memorable diner scene, where Buford unknowingly sits just feet away from the Bandit, evolved from Gleason's own ideas during filming. At one point, he even told Burt Reynolds to keep rubbing his eyes whenever Buford leaned in too close, creating one of the scene's funniest visual gags. Buford never felt predictable, and that's exactly why audiences loved him. But as unforgettable as Buford became, one surprising detail makes the character even more interesting. Parts of him were inspired by a real lawman. Number 12. A real lawman inspired Buford T. Justice. As outrageous as Sheriff Buford T. Justice seemed on screen, the character wasn't entirely a product of Jackie Gleason's imagination. Believe it or not, parts of him came from real life. The name Buford T. Justice reportedly belonged to an actual Florida Highway Patrol officer who knew Burt Reynolds' father, Burton Reynolds Sr., the longtime police chief of Riviera Beach, Florida. But the inspiration went well beyond the name. Growing up around law enforcement, Reynolds spent countless hours listening to police officers swap stories, tease one another, and come up with colorful expressions for just about every situation imaginable. Those conversations stayed with him long after childhood. Years later, when Smokey and the Bandit came together, many of those memories found their way into Buford's personality. Reynolds even recalled that some of the sheriff's memorable expressions sounded remarkably similar to things he'd heard his father and fellow officers say over the years. That's what makes Buford so entertaining. Beneath the exaggerated temper, endless insults, and over-the-top determination is a character grounded in recognizable personalities. And while Buford became one of the movie's biggest highlights, he almost ended up chasing a very different bandit. Number 11. Jerry Reed was almost the Bandit. Today, it's almost impossible to imagine anyone other than Burt Reynolds sliding behind the wheel of that famous Black Trans Am. But in the early days of production, the role of the Bandit was nearly played by someone else. Director Hal Needham originally envisioned country music star Jerry Reed as the film's lead. Reed had the easygoing charm, quick wit, and natural charisma that Needham believed were perfect for the character. At the time, Smokey and the Bandit was expected to be a small, low-budget road comedy, not a major Hollywood release. As one of the biggest box office draws of the 1970s, Reynolds immediately elevated the project. The studio increased the budget, expanded the production, and suddenly had much bigger expectations for the film. Fortunately, Jerry Reed didn't leave the project. Instead, he stepped into the role of Cletus Snowman Snow, the Bandit's loyal trucking partner. The change turned out to be the perfect fit, and Reed's easy chemistry with Reynolds became one of the movie's greatest strengths. In a fun twist of movie history, Reed eventually got the opportunity to play the Bandit in Smokey and the Bandit Part 3 after Reynolds chose not to return. Hal Needham's original casting idea finally came full circle. But finding the right Bandit wasn't the only casting battle. Convincing the studio to hire Sally Field proved just as challenging. Number 10. The studio didn't want Sally Field. Looking back, it's hard to believe Sally Field was never the studio's first choice. Today, it's impossible to imagine Smokey and the Bandit without her, but convincing Universal Pictures wasn't easy. At the time, studio executives weren't convinced Field had the right image for Carrie. They thought she was too wholesome, too closely associated with her television roles, and not glamorous enough to lead a major action comedy. Burt Reynolds saw things differently. After watching Field's powerful performance in Sybil, he became convinced she had far more range than audiences had seen. He believed she could bring humor, intelligence, and genuine chemistry to the film, so he personally pushed for her casting. Field had her own reasons for accepting the role. After years of being known as television's girl next door, she wanted the chance to prove she could succeed on the big screen. Smokey and the Bandit gave her exactly that opportunity. From the moment filming began, the decision paid off. Field's quick wit and effortless chemistry with Reynolds turned Carrie into much more than the typical love interest. She became an equal partner in the adventure, matching the Bandit's confidence with humor and charm of her own. Ironically, the studio's biggest concern became one of the film's greatest strengths, and as audiences watched their chemistry light up the screen, very few realized those feelings weren't entirely fictional. Number 9. When the cameras stopped, the romance didn't. The chemistry between Burt Reynolds and Sally Field felt so natural on screen because, in many ways, it was. While filming Smokey and the Bandit, the two stars began a relationship that would last for nearly 5 years. Their connection developed gradually, fueled by long days on set, constant improvisation, and a shared sense of humor that made working together feel effortless. Because so much of the movie was unscripted, many of their conversations weren't carefully rehearsed. They simply reacted to each other, joked around, and enjoyed the moment. That spontaneity gave their performances a warmth audiences could immediately recognize. For Sally Field, the relationship arrived at an important point in her career. Reynolds constantly encouraged her, reminding her that she had the talent to become one of Hollywood's leading actresses. Years later, Field admitted that his confidence helped her believe in herself professionally. Reynolds never forgot the relationship either. Long after they went their separate ways, he openly described Sally Field as the love of his life and often spoke about the regret of letting that relationship slip away. Knowing what happened behind the scenes gives many of their scenes together an extra layer of authenticity. What audiences saw wasn't just convincing acting. It was two people who genuinely enjoyed being together. But memorable performances weren't the only thing Smokey and the Bandit gave audiences. It also delivered a song that became just as legendary as the movie itself. Number 8. The song that captured the whole movie. Some movies spend months searching for the perfect theme song. Smokey and the Bandit found its signature tune in just a matter of hours. Director Hal Needham asked Jerry Reed to write a song that captured the spirit of the entire movie. Reed stepped away for a short time and returned with Eastbound and Down. That was all Needham needed to hear. According to Reed, the director loved it immediately and reportedly joked that if he changed even one note, he'd regret it. Fortunately, the song stayed exactly as it was. What made Eastbound and Down so memorable wasn't just its catchy melody. It told the story of the movie before the adventure had even begun. In just a few verses, listeners understood the mission, the pressure, and the race against time, waiting for the Bandit and Snowman. Before long, the song became inseparable from the film itself. Even today, those opening guitar notes instantly transport fans back to the driver's seat of that famous black Trans Am. But as iconic as the music became, the movie's entire story was inspired by something even more surprising, a real-life problem that few people remember today. Number 7. The real story behind the beer run. At first glance, the plot of Smokey and the Bandit sounds completely unbelievable. Drive hundreds of miles, pick up 400 cases of Coors beer, outrun the police, and collect the reward. It feels like something Hollywood invented purely for entertainment, except it didn't. Believe it or not, the movie's central mission was inspired by a real situation in the 1970s. Back then, Coors beer wasn't widely available east of the Mississippi River. Because it wasn't pasteurized and contained no preservatives, it had to remain refrigerated from the brewery to the customer, making nationwide distribution both difficult and expensive. That limited availability created unexpected demand. People really did travel west, load up on Coors, and transport it back home. Depending on where they lived and how much they carried, they could even run into state alcohol distribution laws. Hal Needham first encountered the idea while filming Gator in Georgia. A crew member brought several cases of Coors from California, and after storing them in a hotel refrigerator, Needham noticed bottles mysteriously disappearing. He later discovered the hotel maid had been taking them home because her boyfriend couldn't buy Coors anywhere nearby. That simple incident sparked an unforgettable idea. Add a fast car, a determined truck driver, and one relentless sheriff chasing them across the South, and the foundation for Smokey and the Bandit was born. But while the story made the movie memorable, one machine stole just as much attention as the cast. Number 6. The Trans Am that became a legend. Some movies create unforgettable characters. Smokey and the Bandit did something even rarer. It turned a car into a Hollywood icon. Before 1977, the Pontiac Trans Am was already popular among performance enthusiasts. After the movie's release, it became one of the most recognizable cars in America. The black and gold special edition Trans Am wasn't just another vehicle on screen. It became a symbol of speed, freedom, and rebellion. As audiences watched the Bandit drift through corners, outrun police cars, and pull off impossible stunts, demand for the Trans Am skyrocketed. Pontiac dealerships were suddenly flooded with customers asking for the exact model they had seen in the movie. Sales climbed dramatically over the next few years, and the black and gold edition became one of Pontiac's most sought-after vehicles. The company appreciated the publicity so much that its president reportedly promised Burt Reynolds a brand new Trans Am every year for the rest of his life. Although that arrangement eventually ended after the executive retired, the movie had already secured the car's place in automotive history. Even today, mention Smokey and the Bandit, and many fans picture the black Trans Am before they think of any character. And as the car became an American icon, the movie sparked another craze that spread far beyond the highway. Number 5. How a movie started a nationwide craze. Long before smartphones and navigation apps, truck drivers relied on a different kind of technology to stay connected: CB radios. They used them to warn each other about traffic, road conditions, and, of course, where police officers were waiting. It was a practical tool. Then, Smokey and the Bandit turned it into a nationwide phenomenon. Almost overnight, people who had never driven a truck wanted a CB radio of their own. They started learning trucker slang, giving themselves colorful radio handles, and tossing around phrases like, "What's your 20?" and "Smokey's up ahead." The craze spread quickly. CB radio sales soared, country songs celebrating truckers climbed the music charts, and television shows began borrowing the same expressions audiences had just heard in the movie. Even everyday commuters joined in, chatting over the airwaves as if they were hauling freight across the country. For a brief period in the late 1970s, trucker culture became part of mainstream America, and Smokey and the Bandit was right at the center of it. But while the movie inspired a nationwide craze, its most unforgettable moment came from a stunt that nearly didn't work. Number 4. The stunt that almost destroyed the Trans Am. Every great action movie has one scene audiences never forget. For Smokey and the Bandit, it was the legendary jump over the broken Mulberry River Bridge. Watching the black Trans Am soar through the air looks almost effortless. Behind the scenes, it was one of the most dangerous and expensive moments of the entire production. Hal Needham knew they would have only one real opportunity to get it right. If the jump failed, there likely wouldn't be another bridge, another car, or enough money to try again. To improve their chances, the crew reportedly equipped the Trans Am with a hidden rocket booster and carefully adjusted the car's weight to help it stay balanced in mid-air. Then everyone stood back. The stunt worked, but only just. When the car landed, the impact severely damaged the chassis and transmission, leaving that particular Trans Am beyond repair. Fortunately, the cameras captured the jump perfectly, creating one of the most iconic action shots in movie history. The sacrifice of one car gave audiences a scene they remembered for decades. But as risky as that stunt was, it wasn't the closest the production came to real trouble. Number 3. When the crew almost got into real trouble. Making a movie about outrunning the police is one thing. Making sure real police officers know you're filming is something else entirely. Because Hal Needham wanted the chase scenes to feel as authentic as possible, much of Smokey and the Bandit was filmed on real roads at real speeds. While that added excitement to the movie, it also led to some unexpected confusion. During one sequence, a local police officer who reportedly hadn't been informed about the production drove directly into the filming. Imagine seeing a speeding black Trans Am, camera vehicles, and stunt drivers racing down the highway without realizing it was a movie set. The officer quickly stopped the action while the crew explained what was happening and showed the necessary permits. That wasn't the only misunderstanding. Residents regularly called local authorities to report what looked like reckless drivers tearing through town, with police cars appearing to chase them at full speed. From a distance, it looked like complete chaos. In reality, it was just another day making Smokey and the Bandit. Hal Needham later joked that the production probably generated almost as many real police reports as it filmed fictional police chases. But while those incidents ended with a laugh, one stunt came dangerously close to ending very differently. Number 2. The stunt that almost ended in tragedy. For all its comedy and high-speed excitement, Smokey and the Bandit had one moment that became frighteningly real. It happened during the Little League baseball field sequence. On screen, it's another entertaining chase packed with laughs. Behind the scenes, it nearly turned into a serious accident. During the stunt, the driver briefly lost control of the vehicle, sending it toward a group of child extras standing nearby. For a few terrifying moments, everyone on set feared the worst. Thankfully, disaster was avoided. The driver managed to regain control just in time, and no one was injured. Years later, Burt Reynolds described it as one of the most frightening experiences of the entire production. Watching the finished scene today, audiences see only another exciting moment in the chase. What they don't see is how close the movie came to being remembered for an entirely different reason. Fortunately, the production recovered, and one final gamble helped turn Smokey and the Bandit into one of the biggest box office successes of 1977. Number 1. The $1 million bet that paid off. By the time Smokey and the Bandit went into production, Universal Pictures understood one thing: there was no movie without Burt Reynolds. In 1977, Reynolds was one of Hollywood's biggest box office stars. His name alone could fill theaters, and the studio knew audiences would show up if he was behind the wheel of the Bandit's black Trans Am. To secure him for the film, Universal reportedly agreed to pay Reynolds $1 million, a remarkable salary for a movie that had originally been planned as a modest road comedy. In fact, his paycheck exceeded the combined salaries of several other principal cast members. Then, just before filming began, the production faced an unexpected setback. The studio ordered significant budget cuts, forcing first-time director Hal Needham to rethink how the movie would be made. Expensive rewrites were out of the question, elaborate special effects weren't an option, and every dollar suddenly mattered. Instead of scaling back, Needham leaned into creativity. The cast improvised scenes, practical stunts replaced costly visual effects, and the natural chemistry between the actors carried moments that money simply couldn't buy. It was a gamble, but one that paid off spectacularly. When Smokey and the Bandit premiered, it became the second highest-grossing film of 1977, surpassed only by Star Wars. Not bad for a movie built on a handwritten script, daring stunts, and a team willing to trust instinct over perfection. Nearly 50 years after its release, Smokey and the Bandit remains one of the most entertaining road movies ever made. Behind the unforgettable chases and legendary characters were stories just as wild as the movie itself. Which weird fact surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us next time for another fascinating look behind Hollywood's greatest classics.